Folks, please say hello to Damien. Good evening, Damien.
Good evening. How are we doing? Are we all right?
Yeah, doing well, doing well. I like your wee flag in the background there, Union Jack with the Welsh dragon. Good stuff. Well, you're at the actual you're in, which is north. Oh, there you go. Excellent. You're in the north area of the border. Caerphilly is down in the south. In fact, that's where the by-election is tomorrow, just so people know up the map there of exactly where it is. There it is down there in South Wales. Now, this is for the Senedd. Okay. And what's the word that you've been hearing regarding that? It's currently held. In fact, let's look just at the result in 2021 for that particular constituency. Labour's Effin David was pretty much in the lead there on over 13,000, and Plaid came in at 8. And Reform are away down there with barely 500 votes, away down at the bottom. That was in 2021. Now, Mr. David unfortunately passed away, and so the seat has become vacant. Okay. That's the people who are standing. We'll have another look at that in a moment. But for now, Damien, what's your thoughts on what might be happening tomorrow?
I think that Reform are going to comfortably win it. I think it's going to be close. It's not going to be the Runcorn and Hounsby by-election close where it's down to, hello, Catherine. It's not going to be down to 6 votes like it was in my constituency. I think they'll pip it by a couple of percentage points in my particular view.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Wales is sick of Labour, just like they were sick of Labour up in Scotland for being basically neglected, much like the North. This is exactly what they did with the devolution settlement. They thought, we've got these areas forever and a day. We don't really need to put our best people there. That's why you got all the prominent Scottish politicians like Gordon Brown and Tony Blair. Yes, Tony Blair is Scottish. And they go down to Westminster. They don't stay in Edinburgh for some reason. And it's the same thing in Wales. They just put all the best candidates down at, the proper parliaments. And that's why the separatists up in Scotland and the separatists in Wales have such a strong, I don't want to say voice because the rhetoric is a bit nonsensical. Like, I don't actually know the guy's name, but the leader of the separatists in Wales, he says, like, we've got no borders. We want a borderless country. We want all migrants are welcome. That sort of mentality. But if that isn't that antithetical to being a separatist, isn't the whole point of being a separatist is that you do want a border? It's just specifically with England. That's what I think all the Celtic nations have in common with their separatists. It's not about nationhood for their country, it's about hatred of the English.
That's an interesting point. It is an interesting point, and I don't like to acknowledge that in the sense of it's not a very nice thing to acknowledge, but one does often come to that sort of conclusion.
It's like
in a sense.
It's like one of the arguments that I remember up in Scotland when you had your referendum in 2014 is, well, but out your English is nothing to do with you. But these are the very same people that will go out to the mass deportations protest and say migrants are welcome. So which is it? You've got a problem with somebody with England having a voice in your parliaments or in your political discourse, but you're okay with Abdul from Kabul to come over and become Scottish. Which is it? Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
It only makes sense. It only makes sense through that perspective that, in fact, they simply don't like, quote unquote, the English, however they may define them. Just a quick word to the folk on TikTok. If you want to see this interview, you'll need to go over to youtube.com/. UK a force for good, and you'll see us, and you'll see the mighty man from the Mersey, Damien Davies. Good.
But here's the thing, from my perspective, from a unionist perspective, it means that I can take things that are Scottish and they're my own. Say, for example, if I got married tomorrow, I potentially would get married in a kilt, and that's part of my British identity. That's not specifically Scottish, and a lot of people, especially locally, will look at me and go, "Damien, you're nuts. What do you want? You're not Scottish." I'm like, "I'm British. It's part of my identity. It's part of my country." I'm not necessarily saying I'll eat a haggis because I don't like haggis, but you get the point I'm trying to make. It's like
Absolutely.
it's just part of our traditions, and that's the whole point of it. I mean, and that's the way I feel about it.
Yeah.
Now the thing back to this by-election down in Caerphilly, some of the rhetoric that's coming out from the Labours in Wales is, "Don't vote Reform, they're going to privatise your NHS." Well, even if that was true, which is not, by the way, and I'm on the fence whether I'd actually like that or not, I can be argued either way. What they're forgetting is this is a single Senate member, which will mean that Reform get 2 Senate members as opposed to 1. This isn't the Senate elections of next year. This isn't what we're talking about here. So when they're making these big policy debates or making it a talking point and saying, "Do you want them to privatise your NHS?" We go, that's not on the table tomorrow. The table is, do you want a single assembly member? That's what's on the table. If they had a
Yeah.
strong argument, they wouldn't have to make points that aren't relevant yet.
So do you think Labour are sort of out the running here?
Well, yes, it's a two-horse race. There's 2 horses between the separatists and Reform. That's the way it is. And you'll also find, I've done a bit of legwork on this, you'll find the native Welsh speakers tend to skew towards Plaid, and the native Anglicised Welsh people tend to skew towards Reform. Obviously, there are outliers. You'll get some people that speak Welsh that will vote Reform, and some people that have English as the first language vote for Plaid. But generally speaking, that's the pattern, and you can look at on like heat maps and things like that. You tend to find, and it's probably the same up in Scotland, even though you probably don't have as many native Gaelic speakers that they do to Welsh speakers in Wales, but the principle's still the same. That's why when I went on to your Highland tours when I was up in Scotland a few years ago, when you go into the Highlands, you get all these SNP signs and stuff like that when you go out to the sticks and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We talked there about dislike of the English and stuff like that, but I wonder, there's also the fact that some of these folk that you've referred to, the rural people, they're kind of divorced from reality in a way. And if you live in an island in the north of Scotland or in the Highlands somewhere, or in parts of Wales, which are extremely rural, I mean, you can go into parts of Wales, including South Wales, and it's like the world doesn't seem to have touched it in the last 30 years. I mean, you still get little villages, coastal villages, and so on, where nobody's really going. And they're kind of sheltered from the world. And so I can understand some people just like living in their little Welsh world where they all speak Welsh or that, and that's a nice thing, really, in a way. It would be nice if everybody could hide from the modern world in that way. And I think
it harkens back to my poster behind me, my Middle Earth poster in the Shire in Lord of the Rings, where it's just secluded, out of the way, keep themselves to themselves, not interacting with the country or the world at large, just sort of in your own little bubble. And you get these all over the country. Like if you look in the southwest down Bristol way, that's where the Lib Dums, I call them the Lib Dums, the Lib Dems, that's where they're pretty much a stronghold. Now,
really?
as soon as Operation Scatter, with all of these dinghy divers, illegal migrants, because the cities are at saturation point now, they can't really cram any more into the big cities like London, Manchester, Liverpool, Cardiff, Edinburgh, Glasgow. They're all sorts of full now, so they've got to scatter them out to the shires. So when they start to do that, you'll find a lot of these Lib Demi places, or if you look in Wales, when they start pushing them into the separatist areas and they get all the migrants and they come out with the arguments they're just as Welsh as you and me, you'll find that they probably go very, very reformy or UKIP-y rather quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look forward to that.
I think so, and I think what you're seeing as well is some SNP people, obviously a minority, but you're seeing SNP people moving to reform, and we saw that. I mentioned that last week. It was actually an article that I found in the National of somebody from the SSP saying that they do meet people who used to be supportive of the SNP, but who are now going to be voting reform. So I do think that as the establishment, by which I'm talking about Plaid and Labour and the SNP and so on, as the establishment simply reveals itself as open border fanatics, people who don't actually believe in the idea of a nation, because if they believed in the idea of a nation, they would want to see its indigenous people respected. They'd want to see the borders protected. They would want to stop the levels of human incomers who are changing that nation, or at least they would want to severely restrict that movement. You know, if they were really for the nation, that's what they would be for. And as more nationalist-minded people look at the establishment and see that their leaders, whether it's Plaid or SNP, are not for defending that nation, then they're going to lose support to people who will say that it should be defended.
Well, I noticed this pretty much straight away when I went up to the SNP and I sort of seen them debating and whatnot. No doubt they've got a few skilled speakers, particularly the two that are no longer in politics up there, which is Nicola Sturgeon and the late Alex Salmond. They are decent public speakers. You can't take that away from them. But the rhetoric and the actual arguments they're making are very specific and very generalised. Now, if you look at your separatist blueprint for independence back in 2014, if you believe to the letter what the SNP were trying to sell you, it wasn't actually the breakup of Britain at all. It was about getting a federal Britain, because they refer to it as the United Kingdoms of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, meaning that each of the four nations would have an equal say in Westminster Parliament, regardless of whether you've got 5 million people like you've got in Scotland or you've got 50 million people like you've got in England. They would have to. That seems to be the main argument that the separatists make, whereas I don't see that argument at all, because you being a Glasgow man and me being down in Cheshire, I think we're pretty much identical in every which way in terms of we all have the same wants and needs and desires, and there's no because when people say that multicultural failed, generally speaking, the globalist multiculturalism, meaning importing the entire universe to Britain, has failed, and I would agree with that. But I'd also caveat that, and I'd also make the point that multiculturalism between the specific identities of the United Kingdom, and I'll put the Republic of Ireland in that as well, were so similar that we've made it work as a success, and it's not necessarily a bad thing if you align nations that are very similar and very alike. So I'd always have that caveat. So there's no absolutes in that. But that's why I'm always pro-union, because there was really no measurable difference. And I put my scientist hat on to say that.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. The differences, to the extent that they exist, were always pretty minimal, really, around accent and, to a small extent, of course, language itself. And those were sorts of differences also. But beyond that, as far as manners and cultural proclivities and versions of morality and so on, that were all very, very similar.
Well, even if you look
British.
at even if you look at the different branches of the faith, meaning Christianity, we have Church of England, obviously in England. I think you're Presbyterian up in Scotland, and in the Republic of Ireland, obviously they're Catholics. There's all branches of the same religion, which is Christianity. It's all branches of the same thing. It's not like the religion of peace, which causes so many problems in the United Kingdom. It's not about that. That's a very, very different. That's a conquering religion. It's pretty much in the holy book. Their Quran. That's the issue that we've got with the I'd say minority of the Muslim population. that are extremists that read the Quran verbatim and take it literally. But it's a very big problem, and that's what you don't really get with the branches. Every other religion have expelled their extremist elements. That's why you don't get the atrocities from Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists. They don't go around and create the atrocities or anything like that. It's all from one religion. Anyway, we digress.
Yes, yes.
Back to this by-election.
On that sort of thing, Dominic says here, the rural Scots, in his opinion, don't mind being in the Union, and the majority of anti-English tend to be in the central belt, mainly perhaps in Glasgow. I think I know what you're getting at as far as that's concerned, Damien. Indeed, I think Christopher says many of them are former residents of Hibernia. That's true. Again, one can't, of course, totally generalize, because we do meet quite a few who come up to our stall who are very much unionist, even though they may be Republican Irish.
But
they're for like keeping Britain together because they see that's the best thing. That's, of course, so there's always
well, it's also pride and ego, I would say. All right, there's a lot of devolved politicians like your Nicola Sturgeon, all right, that not necessarily want Scotland to be independent, or sorry, separate from the United Kingdom, because it would be better for Scotland. They want the separation from the United Kingdom for their ego. It's simply they want to be a world leader on the world stage. They want to go around the world. They want to waste your taxpayers' money with a separate country. To heck to whether it's actually better for Scotland or England, that's an aside. It's all about their own ego, and you see that a lot in politics. If people strip ego out of it, then you probably get a lot more effective people in the parliaments, which is what we need. When you look at our parliament, by the way, down in London, I think to myself, when these bills are going through parliaments and whatnot, how often do each of the individual MPs actually read a bill from top to bottom? Like, I'll give you an example. The Online Safety Act is over 500 pages long, all right? Back in the day, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, these parliamentarians wrote the laws themselves. They legislated the laws. They wrote the laws. They were lawyers. They were academics. They knew what they were bringing into law. When you look at the current parliament, do you think that we've got the thinkers, the best thinkers of the country, legal experts and whatnot, actually as elected parliamentarians? Or do you think they get the abridged Cliff Note version, a quick summary of what the bill's intended to do, and then they get whipped by the parties who run it through anyway?
Oh yeah, that has to be the case. In fact, I'm sure that most of the politicians simply never look at a bill, and in a sense, how can they? Because they're busy doing lots of other things. They've got their constituency work to do, which is a full-time job in itself. And trying to read a 500-page act on health and safety when you yourself know absolutely nothing about that field is an impossible task that you're asking them. So they will simply look to the party leadership who will have a position on it, and they'll say, Joe Bloggs, yeah, vote yes for this, vote no for that.
And they'll do as the whips instruct them to do, and that's pretty much all. Leave it there. They told me it was a good thing. I've read the abridged version, 2 pages long. They say it's going to be used for this. And they don't interrogate it any further, and I think that's what we've lost. It's like, again, I'll digress slightly. Do you know, like when you get like these people and they're getting arrested for burning a Quran by the police, and they use a Public Order Act to do that? The Public Order Acts that were brought in the 1980s under Thatcher, they were brought in to specifically address football hooliganism and to stop rioting at football matches and whatnot. They weren't designed to say you can't talk bad about Muslims or Islam in public because you're going to provoke them to attack you. It was never designed for that, and you'll get this all the time that laws are misrepresented in that way. Anyway,
yeah. Well, that's right, and a law can be extended out to address issues, as you're just saying, that was never intended to. Yeah. So back to the election tomorrow, let's just have a look at the candidates who are standing here, and that's them in alphabetical order by surname. What's the GWLAD? Gwalad? You know anything about that?
The GW.
See the second one there?
I don't actually.
I believe it is it's another nationalist organization, but I think it's like I think it's like the Welsh version of ALBA.
Yeah, it is
You know.
essentially another separatist party. I'm just looking at it now. In late
Mhm.
2017, a preliminary meeting, blah 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 blah. Yeah, I just think it's of the separatist outfit. It's people. It's probably the jumping on the same train. Probably the Alba Party or Alba Party jumped
Yeah.
on in Scotland, which is basically people that are disheartened with the SNP but still support separatism. They've got somewhere to go, so I think it's a receptacle for those people.
Yeah, that's what that'll be. Okay. Another interesting thing which I only discovered today is, and we can get rid of that picture now, is that next year at the Senedd elections, it's going to be held under a completely new voting system. I'm not aware how much you know about that, but from what I've been able to find out, it's currently at the moment there's 40 first past the post constituencies and there's 20 regional seats in all of 5 regions. Now, what they're doing, and this is in Wales, it's not in Scotland, but in Wales, they're changing it. They're scrapping all the first past the post seats and they're scrapping the regions and they're having 16 regions, each of which elects 6 members of the Senedd, giving 96 members of the Senedd altogether. So they're leaped from 60 members of the Senedd at current time to next year they're going to have 96 elected by a whole new, well, it's going to be the proportional representation system that essentially works at the moment for the regional list. So in other words, changing it quite significantly into 16 regions, each electing 6 candidates by proportional representation. So that's a major change. And I wonder how long we have to wait before that comes to Scotland. And I read about it today, and of course they make up all the arguments that, you know, you'll be better represented and you'll have more members of the Senedd to representing you.
Well, no, I would push back on.
all that kind of nonsense.
I would push back on that and say if the caliber of the politician for the 60 is anything to go by, I want less, not more.
But you wouldn't want any more. You definitely wouldn't want any more.
Well, no, definitely not. I'm actually thinking of running as a Reform candidate as a local councillor when my elections come up, because I'm in Runcorn and Helsby. But the way that it works down here is I'm actually in a unitary authority, which is called Halton, which includes Widnes, which is the other town on the opposite side of the River Mersey to me, and that's controlled by Labour. Now they're currently butting heads with our Reform MP, so I put my name forward to be a candidate. Now whether they accept me as a candidate is another matter, because on my channel, on my YouTube channel, I have been critical of Reform, even though I'm a member of Reform and I do vote for them. And I'm glad that Sarah Potion's my MP. I won't shy away from critiquing anyone or anything that I think needs the attention. So when that incident with Rupert Lowe happened, I critiqued that. And there was another incident regarding Rupert Lowe and an incident with his own dog. And I critique that. Just whether they look at that and they're like, well, he's not the same player. He's going to critique us. I'm like, of course I will. I'll critique anybody. You're not going to shut me up. Of course, I'll critique anyone. And that's the only way. That's the only way. You have to critique everybody, and you have to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think that you should at least put your name forward, and that you should see how you get on. And definitely, you've certainly got the ability, and you've got the mentality that should fit right in. But of course, they will be concerned about running a tight ship. And so if they see people who are not, who have got a kind of mind of their own, as it were, as you've obviously got running your YouTube channel, then they might be a little bit hesitant. That's the only thing. But for no other reason, you should have a good chance of that.
Well,
And
not
I do
just
hope that
that.
you could be elected.
I mean, there was an incident, right? So I'll say this, right? There was an incident down south. I can't remember specifically where, but the local Labour one, I think it was in east of England, down Epping Way, where all the migrant hotel protests started. It was down in that particular area. I think it was Basildon, which is where James McMurdoch is currently the Independent MP, but he was elected on the Reform ticket. Basically, word got out to the Reform council, sorry, the Labour councillors, that the head teacher of that school was pro-reform. Shock horror. And the Labour council tried to get him to resign his position as head teacher of the school because of the safeguarding issue of somebody who supports reform being around children. I know.
Mental.
I know. No,
Yeah.
no. So I'm saying, and then they tried to reword it and say, well, it's not necessarily that. It's a lot of the local reform councillors are volunteering in the local community, and they're going to be around children, and they're going to be like traffic wardens and things like that. You know, like the lollipop ladies and things like that, or the lollipop man. And what it is, and I called it out. Essentially, what it is, Labour used to be the party of community and localism, and they used to do all of this stuff, you know, helping out in the neighbourhoods and things like that. But in all of these areas, anywhere where they're basically elected, the north of England, in Wales, and it's the same up in Scotland as well, they don't bother with any of that, what they call busy work anymore. It's beneath them. The
Yeah.
Champagne Socialists, they don't want to, well, they don't deal with the working class. Go near the work, no.
Yeah.
And that's what they're afraid of. That's why they're using every trick in the book against reform,
Yeah.
because they're actually putting in the hard yards on the ground in local communities, doing things like this, like local bake sales, working in the local community centre as a volunteer, you know, going to the old people's homes and sitting with the old elderly people, the people that will actually vote in elections. And Labour are thinking, we've abandoned our communities. The people know we've abandoned our communities. And then you look at the mess that they're making of the grooming gang inquiry down in London, how all of these white British girls all over the country were let down in predominantly Labour-led areas. I'm like, we're screwed. We're completely screwed.
Yes, I wouldn't like to be depending upon my position within the Labour Party in order to keep me in bread and butter
And then you
these
look at the
days.
and then you
I
look at the
have to
farmers'
say,
tax. You get all of these rural MPs, Labour MPs that were brought in, and they won these rural constituencies off the Tories. And then
yeah,
they backstabbed all the farmers as well. And the farmers, it looks like the farmers are going to be staging a national strike, and they're going to be starving the supermarkets of produce as well. So that's going to be interesting when that kicks off.
starving the supermarkets. Well, I hope they don't backfire and end up starving the population.
Well,
But I'm sure they've got it figured out in some way.
what's the old adage? It's basically every man's 3 meals away, or three famous meals away from an uprising.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, once the food stops going into the supermarket, most people have got literally don't even have cans in their cupboards. I always say to people, keep at least 3 months worth of canned food.
Well, yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, absolutely. Keep it and just use it on a rotating basis. Anyway, on that happy thought of Armageddon, let's bring this very quick 28 minutes interview to a sorry end. People can find you, Damien Davies, on youtube.com/@ Cheshire Cat Musings, all one word, and ensure that there be at in there.
Now I know you're live, by the way, so I'll just say this quickly. I'm only half serious, but if you ever want me on for a full hour, I'd be open to that in future if you want to consider it. So
absolutely, we'd love to have you on.
Because it seems like we'll have a chat as soon as we get a good chat going, it sort of winds down. So if you ever want to do a longer one, just let me know.
Let's figure out how we can do that. Definitely, maybe we run a Christmas special or something like that. That might be an idea, actually, because we'll be doing our Christmas crowdfunder. So maybe we should think about having a Christmas special. For the first couple of years that we were on YouTube, we actually did 2 Christmases in succession. We did a 10-hour telethon. I think it was in 2019 and 2020, but at the time we didn't have all that many YouTube viewers, and we just didn't think it was worth doing again. Excuse me. we're not about to do that again because it was pretty hard work, I have to say. But we could do a couple of hours, 2-3 hours, something like that. Maybe we'll figure that out. Thanks for the suggestion, Damien. We'll have you on next month again. You're definitely our man on the Mersey, who brings us all the good chat. So until then, Damien, we'll say good night.